Hi, friends. Welcome to Organic True Crime with Sydney Hopes, where I talk about interesting true crime stories and also just interesting spooky stories that I find and want to talk about. So, thanks for joining me. I hope you have as much fun as I do, especially now that it is my favorite time of year, which is spooky season. So, this month I'm going to be talking about more Halloween themed, still some true crime, but also some ghost stories. And today, we're going to be talking about the real story behind Annabelle the Doll, which I have been interested in a long time because of the involvement of the Warrens, which we'll get into. But anyway, true story of Annabelle the Doll. In 1970, two nursing students, Donna and Angie, were living together along with Angie's fiance, Lou. And this year, Donna was gifted a Raggedy Ann doll. Raggedy Ann dolls are, well, at this point, vintage, but they were dolls that were made after a children's book series, which I actually used to have. I had a Raggedy Ann and a Raggedy Andy, and they were huge and honestly terrifying, and I used to pick their hair out, and I wish I hadn't because now they're vintage, and I don't know really what happened to them. But anyway, we're not talking about mine. We're here to talk about Annabelle, who at first was just a Raggedy Ann doll that Donna received as a gift. And some say that it was from her mom, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I just know that it was a gift. And she thought it would be cute to leave it on her bed as like a decoration. So she started leaving her new Raggedy Ann doll on her bed. And after a few days, she started kind of noticing that it was not in the same position that she left it, but still on her bed. It was just a little bit, so she didn't really think about it that much. But eventually, these movements started to progress. She started to move more when she would leave. She would come back and she would be in a completely different position, which kind of freaked her out a little bit. So Donna decided to keep her Raggedy Ann doll on the couch in the living room as decoration instead. And at this point, her roommate Angie started noticing the movements too. And again, it was just a little bit, she would shift position when they left the house. But apparently, the Raggedy Ann doll did not like being moved to the couch. She liked her spot on Donna's bed. So sometimes they would come home and the doll would be back in Donna's bed with the door shut when Donna had left it open. So super scary, but they didn't mind too much. They still kept the doll, but it did freak them out a little bit. So they decided to get a medium to come and talk to their doll and tell them what was going on with it. This medium informs them of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins, whose body was found in a field where their apartments now stood. And she also told them that Annabelle said that she felt comfortable with Donna and she really wanted to stay with her. So Donna agreed and she gave her permission to stay with her as her doll. And at this point, things got weird. Annabelle the doll now started to sit in positions that Angie and Donna couldn't explain. They said that they would try and set her back up into this position themselves and it wouldn't work. She would just fall over because this doll is just kind of floppy. It's not like the one in the movies. It's not porcelain. It just falls right over. But they would find her standing up, leaning against a chair, or they would find her kneeling or sitting with her arms and legs crossed, and then they wouldn't be able to make this doll do that later. That was kind of scaring them a little bit, but not as much as when they started finding notes from Annabelle. They found little pieces of parchment paper, which they did not keep in their apartment, so they knew it wasn't theirs, it wasn't from them. And they would find it with little childlike handwriting on it, and it would say things like, "Help us," or "Help Lou," which was Angie's fiance that sometimes stayed there. I don't think he actually lived there with them, but he was there a lot. Now, speaking of Lou, he had several instances with Annabelle himself, and they were terrifying. So he first says that there was one night where he was sleeping in the apartment and he woke up in the middle of the night and he was just terrified and he didn't really know why. He just knew he woke up and was very scared and he couldn't move. He was so scared that his whole body was paralyzed and he couldn't move. And then all of a sudden he looked down at his feet and he saw the Raggedy Ann doll kind of just gliding up him. And she came up to him and she started strangling him until he passed out. And then he woke up the next morning and he was sure that it was not a dream. But Annabelle wasn't in the room and he woke up. So, kind of gets looked over. But then one day, Lou and Angie were alone in the apartment. Donna wasn't home, and they were packing to go on a road trip. I think they were about to go on some kind of trip, and they were packing their bags when they started hearing a bunch of rustling in Donna's room, and they knew Donna wasn't home, so they immediately thought there was an intruder, that someone must have climbed through the window or something. So Lou decides to go check it out. And he waits until all the rustling is done, until he doesn't hear anything anymore. And then he opens the door and he goes in. And he starts looking for signs of an intruder to see, like, is the window open or is something broken? Things moved around, things missing. And he sees that Annabelle is just kind of thrown on the floor. It looked like she had just been tossed in the middle of the floor of the room. But he doesn't really find anything else. So he turns around and goes to leave, when all of a sudden he feels this sharp pain on his chest, where he found 7 claw marks just appear onto his chest while he was in the room, and they healed really quickly. Apparently there weren't any scars or marks left over from it. They healed super fast, but they were really bad while he was in the room. I do at this point feel like I have to add that I'm very skeptical of stories like this, so I'm sorry if I make a lot of faces and I'm acting kind of sarcastic. I don't know how to feel about them ever. Haunted stories, I always love hearing them and I'm very interested in them, and I don't totally disbelieve them, but I also can't ever fully be like, yeah, that definitely happened, that sounds right. I think that's why I like to hear about them, because I want one to prove me one way or the other. I want some story to make me know for sure. I don't know, I guess I'll just keep looking. But anyway, just wanted to explain my faces and things that I do, and my feelings on the subject of Annabelle the Doll and all haunted stories that we'll be talking about. In 1971, about a year after having Annabelle, when things are just getting worse and worse, it seems, Donna finally decides that she needs to contact the church and ask for help. And she is eventually put through to Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, if you don't know, the Warrens are known for basically ghost hunting. They help families. They helped several families get rid of haunting issues. And there have been a lot of books and movies made on the cases that they handled. And going back to my skepticism note, I've always also been very interested in the Warrens, because they usually seem to be helping people, like making a difference, and that's great. But they do also make they did also make a lot of money from it. So it kind of makes you just wonder, But anyway, Ed and Lorraine Warren are contacted by Donna, and they are interested in her story and feel that she needs help, so they fly to wherever Donna is. I couldn't find that out. Anyway, they come to her to meet Annabelle the Doll. So the professionals, Ed and Lorraine Warren, inform Donna and Angie that Annabelle the Doll, since it's just a doll, it's an inanimate object, it can't be possessed. So they say that what is happening is not a little girl possessing their doll, but actually an inhuman demon, basically, is just manipulating the doll. It's just moving it around so that they know that he's there and trying to get attention. And then it used the medium that they brought in to prey on the girl's vulnerability and tell it that it's just this little girl named Annabelle, and she just wants to stay with them because she feels safe with them. And so they accepted and they invited it in. And that's when it started progressing and starting to actually scare the girls and leaving those notes and attacking Lou. And the Warrens tell them that if it had just been 2 or 3 more weeks, that one of them probably would have been possessed or harmed or killed. And so it's very good that they got to them on time. So they stayed and helped the girls with the doll, and they agreed, came to an agreement with Donna that the Warrens would take Annabelle the Doll back with them, because they had an occult museum in Connecticut where they lived. It was connected to their house, and they had all kinds of haunted objects and things like that in their museum. So they took Annabelle back home with them. I don't know if they actually had the museum at this point, but they did at some point, and that was where Annabelle lived most of her life, until it actually just recently closed. We'll get to that later. Anyway, they took Annabelle back home. But on their way home, they had a bunch of car trouble. They said their car kept stalling and it kept swerving over, just like yanking, pulling into the other lane and almost getting them into accidents until Ed Warren finally pulled over and grabbed his holy water and threw it on Annabelle, the doll. And after that, they were fine and were able to get back home to Connecticut. So yes, they didn't fly. Earlier I said they flew in, but they drove. They were in their car and their car had trouble. So at first, the Warrens just kept Annabelle in their house with them, and she moved about the house, and they said she levitated on several different occasions. And she was especially rambunctious when people of the church would visit, which Ed and Lorraine Warren were very involved with the church, so this happened a lot. But there was one specific occasion when Father Jason Bradford went up to the doll and he picked her up and he said, "You can't hurt anyone, you're just a doll," and then threw her back on the couch where she was sitting. And Ed saw this and said, "You really shouldn't talk to her like that." And on the way home, Father Jason Bradford's brakes went out while he was at an intersection and he ended up being in a very serious accident. So the Warrens, after this, had a special case made for Annabelle, and she was put into the museum where she had signs saying absolutely do not bother her or open this case. I think it said I'll put a picture in. In the museum, it was a part of their house, and until Lorraine died in 2019, it was open. But then right after that, it had to close because it was actually violating some zoning laws because it was in a residential area. It was out of their house, so you can't have a business out of a residential area, so they did have to close it. But they do still have that building, and it does still have all of their haunted objects. I don't know what to call it. It does still have all of that in it. Their child, I think it's their son, their child now owns the house, and he owns that, but it's just not a museum anymore. You can't pay and go visit. There is one specific incident with Annabelle that's talked about a lot while she was in the museum. A man and his girlfriend came to visit the museum, and he started banging on her glass and yelling things at her until eventually Ed Warren had to ask him to leave. And when he did leave, he and his girlfriend got on his motorcycle and they drove away. And on their way home, they were laughing and making fun of this stupid doll that couldn't hurt anybody, it's just a doll, when all of a sudden he lost control of his motorcycle and he crashed into a tree and he died instantly. His girlfriend was hospitalized for over a year, but she did live and she's out and okay. But she now says that when it happened, they were laughing and talking about Annabelle the doll, and then he all of a sudden just lost control. So people do speculate and say that Annabelle did this, like she made the brakes go out in the priest's car. So I think that's the only death that she's responsible for, but there have been several incidents like that where she does not like to be made fun of, and she also does not like people from the church. So I wonder what it's like now that she's not in a museum. She's just chilling in the house. I don't know. I wonder if things still happen. I wouldn't ever want to go in there. That sounds terrifying. And to have it in your house, I don't know. I don't know for sure that I believe in stuff like that, but still, that just seems like you're just asking for it. I don't know. It's scary. I'm sure they have lots of precautions in their own way. Anyway, so that's the story of Annabelle the doll. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you thought that was as interesting as I do, because I always do. It's an old story. A lot of people talk about it, but I still like it. I think it's fun to talk about. I also just really want to hear what y'all think. I want to know if you think that it's real or not, or how, I don't know. I want to know your opinions on this story in general. Tell me what you think. Thank you so much again for joining me, and happy spooky season. Yay!